I'll take you just the way you are. Well, here I am, baby. Practice what you preach. Greed is a funny thing. Once you take a bite of it, it tends to turn on you and start eating you up.
Did you know Barry White had secrets he kept hidden for years? People loved his deep voice and romantic songs, but there was more to his life than music. What was he hiding? Was it about his health, his family, or something else?
Barry is a very, very warm person because he has such a passion for what he does.
Many fans never knew the struggles he faced behind the scenes.
Never gonna give you up. I'm never ever gonna stop.
Let's uncover the untold truth Barry White kept from the world. Barry White was born in Texas but spent most of his childhood in Los Angeles. Growing up was not easy for him. He lived in a small house with his mother and siblings. Life was tough, and he and his brother got into trouble often.
When I was 4, I started getting interested in music through my mother and her playing.
They became part of local gangs, which made their mother very sad. Barry's brother was deeply involved in crime, and Barry himself was also on the wrong path for a while. When Barry was 16 years old, he was caught stealing tires and sent to jail.
It wasn't easy at all because there weren't a lot of kids.
Barry understood the pain and anger that many young people felt. He was even part of the 1965 riots in Los Angeles. His brother, who was his best friend, stayed in the world of crime until he was killed in 1983. A man shot him in the heart, and Barry was heartbroken. Barry later talked about his past openly. He did not hide his mistakes. He wanted young people to know that they were not trapped in a life of crime. He told them that change was possible. Many young people listened to him because they knew he had lived through real struggles. Even though Barry got into trouble as a kid, he always loved music. It was his escape from the hard life he had. As a child, he would listen to songs on the radio and feel a deep connection to them. Every song reminded him of a special time or person in his life. He believed that music had the power to create memories and emotions. When he grew up and started making his own music, he wanted his songs to bring love and happiness to people. He wanted couples to listen to his songs and feel closer to each other. Barry also sang in his church choir, which helped him understand music even more. He loved the sound of different voices coming together. He would spend hours listening to music and trying to learn from it. He paid close attention to how songs were made and dreamed of creating his own music one day. One of the biggest surprises in Barry's life was when his voice changed. As a young boy, his voice was high and soft, like most children. But one day, something unexpected happened. He woke up and his voice was deep and strong. It was a huge change, and it shocked both him and his mother. When he spoke, his chest vibrated, and he could feel the power in his voice. His mother looked at him in surprise. Then she smiled with tears in her eyes and said, "My son is a man now."
I love my neighborhoods. I love my guys, the businessmen. We were something to see. But all good things must come to an end. And the day I went to jail is when it all came very clear to me that I had to change my life.
Barry White and his younger brother, Daryl, grew up in South Central Los Angeles. Life was not easy. Their mother worked hard to take care of them, but the streets were tough. There were gangs, crime, and violence everywhere. Many kids got into trouble because they didn't have much guidance. Barry and Daryl were no different. They started getting involved in small crimes when they were very young. For them, it was just a way of life. They thought stealing and fighting were normal because it was all around them. Daryl was wilder than Barry. He took bigger risks and got into serious trouble. At just 8 years old, he was sent to juvenile detention. That should have been a warning, but it wasn't. As they got older, the trouble got worse. By the time they were teenagers in the early 1960s, they were no longer just kids playing around. They had become part of a real gang. They called themselves the Businessmen. This gang was not just about fighting. They treated crime like a business. They stole, sold drugs, and fought with other gangs. The Slossons and the Gladiators were their biggest enemies. Violence was common. Fights often ended with serious injuries or even death.
And I used to tell my brother Daryl that we gang banging and going crazy out here in these streets, man, but it doesn't lead nowhere.
Barry later admitted that he and his brother were feared. They had built a reputation for being dangerous. But he never tried to hide his past. He believed in telling the truth about his mistakes so that young people could learn from him. He wanted them to know that crime leads to jail, pain, and death. He often said, "I don't want any young person to think they're stuck in that misery." He knew how hard it was to escape that life, but he also knew it was possible.
To an end, and the day I went to jail is when it all came very clear to me that I had to change my life.
Something terrible happened. Daryl was killed in a gang war. Losing his brother was the worst thing Barry had ever experienced. It hurt deeply, but it did not immediately change him. He was too deep in the gang life to just walk away. Instead of stopping, he kept going. He continued stealing and fighting. He felt angry and lost. The only thing he knew was the streets, and he didn't see another way out. At 16, Barry was arrested for stealing tires worth $30,000. This was not just a small crime, it was a big deal. The police took it seriously. He was sentenced to 7 months in a juvenile detention center. For the first time, he had to stop and think. He had time to reflect on his life. He thought about Daryl. He thought about where his life was heading. He started questioning if this was the life he really wanted. While in detention, Barry found comfort in music. He had always loved music, but now it meant something more. One day he heard a song that changed everything. It was Elvis Presley's "It's Now or Never." When he heard it, something inside him woke up. He later said it felt like being hit in the face with a baseball bat. It was a powerful moment. He realized he needed to change. He didn't want to waste his life. He wanted something better. He wanted a future. When Barry got out, he promised himself he would stay out of trouble. But change is not easy. Not long after his release, he was accused of attempted murder. He was arrested again. It seemed like he was going right back to his old ways. But then something unexpected happened. The victim woke up from a coma and said Barry was not the attacker. He was released. It was another wake-up call. He knew he had to stay away from crime for good.
To me that I had to change my life. I had to change my attitude. I had to change my way of thinking. Yeah, I even had to change some of my friends.
Barry had a deep, smooth voice even as a teenager. That voice became his way out. He started focusing on music. He poured all his pain and struggles into his songs. He wanted to leave the streets behind. He wanted to create something meaningful. He knew music could change his life, and he was ready to take that chance. On his 18th birthday, Barry made a big decision. Instead of going back to school, he went to Hollywood. He stood outside Capitol Records for hours, just watching. He saw people coming in and out, working in the music industry. He imagined himself being part of that world. He didn't know how to read or write music, but that didn't stop him. He was determined. That moment gave him the motivation he needed.
Barry is a very, very warm person because he has such a passion for what he does.
Barry White struggled to get noticed. Barry White's journey to redemption after his fractious childhood was not an easy one. He knew he needed to change his ways and give up gang life. As he explained in Love Unlimited, Insights on Life and Love, he decided to transform himself after spending time in jail. After 2 months on the inside, it finally started kicking in, White wrote. I have to change my ways because if I don't, I'm going to end up in jail the rest of my life. White knew he'd have a hard time changing his bad habits, but he didn't see any other way out. A few days after he left jail, he received an offer from friends to join a band and sing bass. Until then, White had never thought of music as a solid option. White credited that moment when he was asked to be a part of the music group in 1960 as the thing that changed the course of his life. However, simply deciding to pursue music wasn't enough. He spent almost a decade trying to get noticed and make a mark in the world of music. Along the way, White worked on collaborations and slowly fought his way to the top.
Not only was he a great singer, but he was like he was a great performer.
Let the music play on.
Barry White finally achieved musical success in the 1970s. It was in the 1970s that Barry White truly started seeing the fruits of his labor. He founded the girl group Love Unlimited and became a producer, a significant landmark in his career. Through a friend, he also met businessman Larry Nunez, who helped him with finances for his album. The album was titled From a Girl's Point of View We Give to You. Love Unlimited. Per Love Unlimited. Insights on life and love, White knew meeting Nunes was a godsend for him. I couldn't believe it, White wrote. Here I was without a dime to my name, with a group I couldn't afford to record, with nothing but my knowledge of music. And over there was Larry Nunez, a millionaire, offering me not just a way to make a decent living, but the opportunity to make my musical life. The 1970s were kind to White, who released one of his most popular tracks, Walking in the Rain with the One I Love, in 1972. It was his first major hit and catapulted him into fame. Around this time, White also started the Love Unlimited Orchestra and found more success with the track Love's Theme. Barry White's career had its ups and downs. What made Barry White stand out was the fact that he didn't shy away from taking risks. He released a solo album called I've Got So Much to Give, which became popular for his hit track, I'm Gonna Love You Just a Little More Baby. White longed for more, and he eventually founded his own label, Unlimited Gold, with CBS Columbia Records in 1979. However, the 1980s had loss and failure in store for Barry White. According to the Sydney Morning Herald, in the late 80s, he attempted to replicate his earlier triumphs with albums like The Right Night and Barry White and The Man Is Back. Nonetheless, things were tough until the 1990s, when he managed a breakthrough with his album The Icon Is Love in 1994. He went on to rack up 2 Grammy Awards in 1999 for his song Staying Power. White's career was definitely impacted by the evolution of disco through the years, but he did manage to keep his fan base hooked onto his music.
When women listened to Barry White, they felt like they were getting taken care of.
For Barry, many people did not always understand him. He had a deep, smooth voice and made romantic music that people either loved or made fun of. Some people in the media did not take him seriously. According to The Guardian, some critics thought his music was too steamy and even called it trashy.
In the last 3 years in America, the birth rate of America had gone up 5% thanks to Barry White's music.
They did not see the beauty in his songs. Instead of praising him for his talent, they sometimes looked down on him. But Barry White did not let that bother him. He accepted how people saw him and even joked about it. He once appeared on The Simpsons as himself and laughed along with the jokes. He was comfortable with people making fun of his image because he knew who he really was.
He made music that was conducive for lovemaking.
Barry White was often labeled as a sex symbol, but he did not let that change how he saw himself. In an interview with Rolling Stone, he made it clear that he was just Barry White, nothing more and nothing less. When asked about all the nicknames people gave him, he said, "It never gets in my way. I'm none of that. I'm Barry White." He did not care what people called him because he knew his true self. He even joked in the interview saying, "Have a sip of champagne. Women are not into fish eggs. They have a different nature. Men love it." He did not take life too seriously and knew how to enjoy himself, no matter what others thought. Even though Barry White had a successful career, there was one big dream he never got to achieve. He always wanted to work with Marvin Gaye, one of the greatest soul singers of all time. They were planning to work on a project together, but sadly Marvin Gaye passed away before it could happen. Barry White wrote about this in his book Love Unlimited, Insights on Life and Love. He said Marvin's death broke his heart because he knew that Gaye was trying to reach new heights in his music. Losing such a great artist was painful, not just for him, but for the whole world. Barry White remembered speaking to Marvin Gaye just days before he died. Gaye had asked him for help with his next album and wanted him to be the producer, but Barry White told him, "Marvin, you're insane. You don't need a producer. That's the last thing you need." White believed that no one could make music like Marvin Gaye except Marvin himself. He said, "I can never produce Marvin Gaye. Marvin is the only one that can produce Marvin." Unfortunately, their project never happened, and Barry White always felt that loss.
He made music that was conducive for lovemaking.
Barry White was famous for his deep voice and romantic songs. Many people thought he must have had a perfect love life because of the way he sang about love. But in reality, his own relationships were full of problems. He had 2 marriages, but both ended in divorce. Even though his music made people feel loved, his personal life was not as smooth.
Well, here I am, baby. Practice what you preach.
His first wife was a childhood friend named Mary. They had 4 children together, but their relationship did not last. After some years of being married, they decided to go their separate ways. In 1969, they ended their marriage. After that, Barry found love again with a woman named Glodian James. She was part of a female singing group called Love Unlimited. They worked together on music, including the song "Walking in the Rain with the One I Love." Their relationship seemed strong, but it also did not last forever. In 1988, Barry and Glodian decided to separate. Even though Barry White sang about love and romance, he later seemed to focus more on his music than on relationships. In 1995, when a journalist asked him about his love life, Barry simply said that he was happy with his life and that his true love was music. He didn't seem interested in looking for another relationship. Besides his struggles with love, Barry also had serious health problems. For many years, he had issues with his weight, which caused more health troubles. As he got older, his body became weaker. In his last years, it was hard for him to even stand up for long periods. He still performed concerts, but it took a lot out of him. After some shows, he was so weak that he almost collapsed. People around him noticed that he was always tired, but Barry did not like going to the doctor. His health problems became worse over time. In 2003, he suffered a stroke which affected his ability to speak. His kidneys were also failing and he had high blood pressure. He needed medical procedures to help him, but his condition kept getting worse. Even though he tried to stay positive, his body could not recover. Barry White passed away in July 2003 at the age of 58. His music, however, lives on, and he will always be remembered as the king of love songs. Barry White was a famous singer with a deep, smooth voice. People loved his music and he was known for his romantic songs. But in his last days, things were not easy for him. His health was getting worse and he could not move the way he used to. When he performed, he had to sit down because his body was too weak. Sadly, some of his fans did not understand this. They wanted him to stand, play the piano, and move like he did before. But Barry just couldn't do it anymore. His manager, Ned Shankman, explained that the fans got angry when Barry performed while sitting. They wanted to see the energetic Barry White they remembered. At some shows, the audience booed him because he could not turn around to face them. They did not realize he was struggling just to be on stage. Barry's son knew how hard his father was trying. He said that his dad did his best even though it was very difficult for him. Barry wanted to make his fans happy, but his body was not strong enough. He had swelling in his legs and ankles, which made it painful for him to move. Even though he was suffering, he still tried to sing for his fans. Barry White had big dreams. He wanted to keep making music and performing, but his body would not let him. He had so many things he still wanted to do, but his health stopped him. It was a sad time for him and the people who loved him. When he passed away, his fans were heartbroken. They gathered in Los Angeles to remember him. Over 100 fans and friends came together to celebrate his life. They danced to his songs and honored him. It showed how much people still loved him, even though some had treated him unfairly before. One of Barry's close friends, Muhammad Mubarak, spoke about him with love and respect. He called Barry the maestro of love and prayed that he would find peace in heaven. Many people admired Barry White, not just for his music, but also for the way he lived his life. He once said that scientists played his music for whales, and it helped them mate. That's how powerful his music was. Barry always said that music was his life. His manager, Shankman, described him as a unique person with a one-of-a-kind voice. Even after his death, his music lives on, and he is remembered as a legend. Barry White made 20 studio albums in his career. His music was a mix of R&B, soul, funk, and disco. Many of his albums and songs were very successful. He had 20 gold records and 10 platinum records. Gold means selling a lot of copies, and platinum means selling even more. In total, he sold over 100 million records worldwide. This made him one of the best-selling music artists ever. His music was influenced by great singers like Ray Charles, Aretha Franklin, and Marvin Gaye. People loved Barry White not just for his music, but also for his romantic style. His deep voice made people feel love and happiness. Some even called him the Walrus of Love because of his smooth and rich voice. One person once said, "If chocolate cake could sing, it would sound like Barry White." His songs were often played at weddings and romantic moments because they made people feel special. Even after Barry White passed away, people still honored him. He got a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and a TV show even fixed his last car for his wife. In 2023, Rolling Stone magazine named him one of the greatest singers of all time. His music will always be loved.